Hello, welcome to Escaping the Echo Chamber. Today we're going to do a deep, not a deep, a basic dive, quick dive into the CBO report of the Raise the Wage Act of 2021. We'll be doing a deeper dive at a later date, but today I wanted to, get something out there about it because it's out and hey, it's important. So as always, don't forget to give me a thumbs up, like, share, subscribe, um, and let's go. So if you take a look at it, there's several things that, in fact, there's the first thing I wanted to highlight is one of the differences between this report and the 2019 report, because the CBO did the report on the Raise the Wage Act in 2019. One of the differences between that act and this one is they both have, well, one of the differences is actually the similarity, what's the same. But because it's the same, it changes. So what's the same is the date that the $15 minimum wage is supposed to be fully phased in. Both bills have the $15 minimum wage fully phased in 2025. But the previous bill, the 2019 version, started earlier. So now, in order for the 2021 bill to reach $15 by 2025, it will have to raise the wage in larger increments and over a shorter period of time. So here you see what they're talking about. The step increases in the 2021 bill are thus larger and would reach $15 per hour more quickly. So that's, one of the differences. There are some other differences, but like I said, we're doing a deep dive later. Right now, I just wanted to get some information out because one of the things, in fact, this section, they're talking about just how the $15 minimum wage will affect the federal budget. So it talks about how it would increase the cumulative deficit by $54 billion. So that's over from 2021 to 2031, $54 billion totally. Um, Before 2025, the increases would be smaller, but after 2025, the increases would be larger because now you've got the $15 minimum wage fully phased in. Higher prices for goods and services would cause for an increase in federal spending. And that would be one of the factors of why federal spending would increase. Okay, so spending for some programs, such as unemployment compensation, would increase, but some programs would have less spending, such as the SNAP program, and thus federal revenues, the net federal revenues would be boosted. Okay, so from 2021 to 2031, the cumulative pay of affected people would increase by 333 billion. So let's take a closer look at that because that's the net. So higher pay would result in 509 billion for people who got higher hourly wages because of this bill. So that wouldn't just be people at minimum wage, that'd be people under $15. So if you're making minimum wage, you're making $10, you're making $12, your money goes up. All of that would result in $509 billion of higher pay for those individuals. However, lower pay would be lowered by 175 billion because of reduced employment. So they're acknowledging there are going to be effects. It's not that everything else stays the same and everybody's wages goes up. People will be out of work. So here they're talking more into that, discussing that more, how employment would be reduced by 1.4 million workers, or 0.9%. And that's their average estimate. But they also say the number of people in poverty would be reduced by 0.9 million. So about 900,000 people out of poverty, less 900,000 less people in poverty, but 1.4 million people out of work. So, some of the things, this just is talking about some of the things it talks about, some of the things that are interesting to me in this quick dive. The effects of employment, the wages of affected workers, distribution of family income is because that's something that was never discussed, very rarely discussed in the CBO 2019 report. What I think what I think is actually like the biggest portion of it as it relates to everyday, Americans. This is what is going to affect you. You can sit here and think, oh, fast food workers will make more money and everybody wins. No, you lose. If you're not a fast food worker, if you were making a certain amount and it was not some astronomical number, your money is worth less. You will now lose income. And that's one of the things that's discussed, effects on prices, and then comparisons with the CBO's July 2019 analysis. What I really wanted to see was if there was anything in the way of corrections that were instituted. But what I did see was, in fact, it was highlighting differences, and there were some different modalities, different ways of calculating, which I find curious. And I don't like, I just find that curious if you have a prior version of a bill, if you start changing how you're calculating numbers. And I'm not saying they did it to make it look better or worse. I mean, I don't know why they changed it, and I don't, and I want to in the future examine what the actual effect was. Does it make the act look worse or better? Just find that real system, and then you change the system from one analysis to the next. Okay, so on revenue, labor income would increase while capital income would decrease. So labor income tends to be more heavily taxed. Tells you why they're so gung ho for it. More taxes. Income would also shift toward lower income people and away from higher income people under the bill. And there are people who cheer and say, "Yes, see, yeah, these rich people," but it didn't say rich people. That's the key point. It just said higher income. What's higher than a $15 income? A $20 income, $25 income, $30 income. And while these may sound like great numbers in certain areas, in areas like New York, they're decent, but by no means. In fact, even in your what Georgia or whatever, Tennessee, even in very low wage areas, that's not rich. That's middle class, and so this is what it's talking about. Income would shift towards lower income people from higher. So you're still affecting people's life, and you're actually screwing over the middle class. That's one of the things that, um, for some reason, and it's not. I'm not just saying proponents of the Raise the Wage Act aren't talking about. It's something I don't see opponents of the Raise the Wage Act talking about, and like that's one of the most important things. Highlight how it's going to hurt regular people. These are not billionaires and millionaires and billionaires. These are regular people who work for a living, who are middle class, who get up every day, put in their 8 hours. Like they're going to be affected negatively. Um, and so higher labor costs would cause business income to be lower under the bill than under current law. So business owners, of course, are also affected. Um, okay, yeah, so I talked about that, how one of the changes. So red for negative. Higher wages would increase the cost to employers of producing goods and services. So, of course, they're going to pass that on to the customers, some of those costs to the customers in the form of higher prices. So they're actually talking about how that will actually also then lead to people to buy fewer goods and services, and it'll tend to reduce employment of workers at all wage levels. Yeah, I should have really, I should have highlighted that because that's also interesting. So it's not just that low wage workers are the ones that would be whose employment would be affected because of decreased revenue. Workers, period, will be affected. So like this will affect, like it's a ripple effect. It doesn't happen in a this doesn't happen in a bubble, just completely isolated from the rest of reality. Um, okay, also, would shift towards those substitutes and reduce um, the employment of low wage workers. Okay, yeah, this is the lower wage workers being put out of work, and quite frankly, this is talking about technology. So, I mean, if it, one of the, on Facebook and everything, there's always the memes about the checkout, the automatic checkouts. It's like, yeah, that's real. And people, as they say, hey, it's not cost effective for me to hire somebody to do something which a computer can do at just a fixed cost. You purchase it once, boom, as opposed to having to constantly pay multiple people to do this job, to run the cash register, and then you know uh, uh, have to worry about things like healthcare and all these other costs that come with employment. By 2025, however, half of the 1.4 million people would be jobless because of the bill would have dropped out of the labor force. So this is talking about the reason why 1.4 million people would have lost their jobs. Because it's talking about in 2021, people would be out of work for other reasons, but by 2025, the loss of jobs is going to be directly related to the $15 minimum wage. And like I said, a lot of the proponents of the bill don't like talking about and will use air quotes for unintended consequences, but they're not unforeseen. And this report, as well as the previous report, make it clear these are not unforeseen consequences. They may not be intended, but they're not unforeseen. So if you know and you're still pushing through with this, I mean, at some point you really just can't keep saying, "Oh, it's unforeseen, it's unintended." Like you knew this was going to happen, and you did, and you just barreled on with it anyway. Now, the green is good, right? So cumulative pay would increase um, by 509 billion for people who get higher wages because of this bill. So like I said, anybody, not just people at minimum wage, anybody under $15. Anybody under $15, their wage will go up. This will be an increase of $509 billion for those individuals. But because of reductions in pay, 175 billion would be lost because some people would be out of work. And I'm also assuming, like I said, I got to do a deep dive. I'm also assuming that is because of um, not just losing employment, not just losing your job, but also losing hours. I've seen in New York, we've got the $15 minimum wage, and a lot of hours have been slashed. You can go to various retail stores, and you'll see like just so much less people. Like there's nobody around to help you, in the aisles. You've got a few people at the cash register, long lines. So you see the effect of people, just shifts being changed, hours being cut, and then less employees in the store. So, which is actually an interesting thing because those are effects that aren't talked about, and I'm not really going to get into that in this um, that much because I'll do a separate video talking about some of the effects that aren't necessarily monetary. Okay, green, something else good. 0.9 million, 900,000 people now above the poverty level, federal poverty thresholds. And those thresholds aren't very high. So I think it was 2018. Um, it was like $12,700 for a single person. So if you're making over that amount of money, you're out of poverty. You're above the poverty line. Families with workers earning wages at or near the federal minimum, real income would increase. So this is not just individuals under $15 an hour. These are people that have wages around $15 an hour. So if somebody makes $16 an hour, it's projected that their pay will increase as well as a result of it. It's not going to be mandated to increase, but it is very likely that employers will say, hey, we got to give them a little bit of a boost because everything's, everything's getting, the money's going up. So we have to give people that were already at this level somewhat of a jump in pay. So for families that lost employment because of the increase in minimum wage, real income would fall. And that's the one I'm talking about. This is just the one of the most critical aspects of this act that nobody wants to talk. Nobody, I don't see people talking about. And I know the proponents of this bill definitely do not want to talk about it. And they will, once you start talking about this, they will switch from talking about the numbers to talking about the morality. Oh, what people deserve. Wait, like that's a separate argument. Let's talk about the numbers. Let's talk about who's going to be hurt by this. So for families that experience a decline in business income, they would lose money. For some that saw no change in their labor income. So that's people who are well above the $15 minimum wage. Somebody's making 20, 25, 30, $40 an hour. These people aren't getting raises because of that. Their money's staying basically the same. But guess what? The higher prices for goods and services now mean that their real income, not their nominal income, but their real income is less. Their money does not go as far as it was going. So raising the minimum wage would slightly reduce the real GDP, primarily because of reduced employment. Once again, it would change the relative prices of goods and services. The largest price increases would be for goods and services that require that are connected to a large amount of low-wage work. So fast food and stuff like that, those prices would be the most heavily to go up. But there's also, I mean, retail would also be among those that have increased prices because their employees are the ones that have to get more money now. Something that's good, labor income would increase under the bill because most people would have earned wages at or near the federal minimum under current law would receive higher labor income. Once again, the capital income falls because of higher labor costs, reduced productivity of capital. So now this is going into more detail about why labor income is increasing, that point, how labor income increases and capital income decreases. It's because corporate profits would be lower, so dividend income would be lower, and then they talk about proprietors' income would also decline. So like this, those are all wealth building um, activities. Those are all wealth building income sources. And that's one of the things that so bothers me about this because but I realize something at this point. We're speaking different languages. The proponents of this bill are talking about, hey, let's get people out of poverty. And somebody like me is talking about, hey, let's help people build wealth. So it sounds like we're talking about the same thing because we're talking about money, but we're actually talking about different things because, among other things, we have a different end game. We have a different path. So that's definitely why the paths are different, because we even have different destinations. They're talking about people just making enough to survive. I'm talking about people being able to thrive. Like that's the difference. We're talking different languages. And now that I've come up with that, now that I've made that revelation, I'm like, okay, wow, that I've had that epiphany. This, I think, can change the way I communicate and improve the way I communicate with people who are proponents of the $15 minimum wage. Because I realize, okay, wait a minute, we're talking about different things, we're speaking different languages, and now because there was part of me that was like, what, you must really hate people, and it affected the way I interacted with people who were supporters and proponents of this. But realizing, okay, we're not even speaking the same language helps me to better understand where they're coming from and how better to communicate why I have different ideas from them. It's not that I hate poor people. It's not that I want people to be in poverty. No, I'm thinking past poverty, past just getting out of poverty, and talking about actual wealth building. So that was, I think, so just despite the fact that there's a great amount of information in the CBO report, I think that is the biggest gain for me personally from this reading this report. It helped me come to reach a conclusion about why there's so much, why there's such this great chasm is it chasm between individuals who want the $15 minimum wage and somebody like me who has been arguing against it. And even when I ran for office, what I was talking about wasn't just getting people, a higher minimum wage. I specifically said no, like they need to be, like I want people to not be concerned about minimum wage because they're making way more than minimum wage. Like minimum wage isn't even a factor in terms of helping people to build wealth, to be financially independent, and live happy lives where you're not just living paycheck to paycheck, um, and doing a job that makes you miserable because you need to do it just to eat. Because remember, even with the $15 minimum wage, hell, even with the $25 minimum wage, and don't say nobody's proposed it because Nomiki Coons is one of the people who already has. When she ran for public advocate, she was advocating for it, and right now I think some people are even going higher than that because hey, inflation happens, prices rise, and what once was good amount of money no longer is. But the point being that like I want people to not have to worry about living paycheck to paycheck. I don't want people to just so even if they're talking about $25 an hour, it's like okay, so that person still has to do a job that maybe they get no respect at. It's just, and people that do this work will understand what I'm talking about. I've done that work. I understand. I'm not just some person, some observer saying, "Oh, as long as they get the money, they're good." Like, no, like these jobs suck. They really suck, and I don't want people to have to be stuck doing these jobs for 5, 10 decades. 5, 10 years, decades. Just it's absurd. I see people talk about, oh, I've been doing this job for 20, 30 years. I'm like, why? Like there's a better way, and that's what we need to be helping people do. Get to that better way. So yeah, I didn't even intend on ending on that note, but hey, it's something that instead of not just getting raw information and raw data out of this, I actually got a really valuable insight that I think will help me communicate better with proponents of the $15 minimum wage. And so that in itself is a win. Thank you for checking out this episode of Escaping the Echo Chamber. As always, like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.